it negates the goals and at least the conceptual achievements of both Yom Tien and Dakar, in which the expanded understanding of education is reduced to concerns with primary schooling and provisions for primary schooling. So it presupposes that once you then do the things right in primary schooling, you'll finally solve something. And I think it is very tragic. On the other hand, I applaud the Millennium Development Goals. Why? Because it was the first time since the triumph of the neoliberal agenda, where policy making was removed from the global policy and decision making was removed from the UN. UN's teeth had been pulled out, and all the power was taken to the international financial institutions, for example. It was the first time that you could see a movement back into the General Assembly again, and member states were recovering their basis for global decision making. So democracy at a global level was being affirmed. For that, I back the Millennium Development process as a process. It does not mean I condone the blinkered things in a lot of its tenets and so on. Now within Africa, here I classed them as milestone 6. There were several remarkable initiatives that have been undertaken, among which can be listed the Segu Perspectives, which led to the adoption of the Organization of African Unity's Decade for Education for Africa, and the Association for the Development of Education Africa, ADEA, which through its specialized working groups generates a series of cross-country analysis highlighting the state of educational development on the continent. These pulled it together, they have found their capping in, the creme de la creme for us in Africa is in the African Union's goals, where those goals are inspired by the following: the continent's aspiration and commitment to promote unity, solidarity, cohesion, and cooperation among the peoples of Africa and African states. It struggles for political independence, human dignity, and economic emancipation. Contemporary multifaceted challenges that confront the continent and its peoples in the light of social, economic, and political changes which are taking place in the world is key in the mind of the African Union. The need also to build partnerships between governments and all segments of civil society, women, private sector, and so on are emphasized. It also acknowledges that the scourge of conflicts in Africa constitutes a major impediment to the socio-economic development, and the need to promote and protect human and people's rights, consolidate democratic institutions and culture, and to ensure good governance and the rule of law. I mention these things, why? Because when you are going to do a campaign, watch where you get your preamble from. Your campaign can be dead before it has started, depending on what you put as your preamble, which means you are anchoring parameter. Most of the time we cite the UN things, but if you do not go regional and you understand regional interpretations and regional contextualizations of these things, people, they can tell, they can smell you from a distance. A document comes again and say, ooh, these are the Globetrotters, you know, here comes another briefcase full of something, you know? So, and Africa has been through it so much that you won't get far. People sit politely, or they give you that Sulian look, waiting for what it is you want to say, and if they see that you want them to play up, they will play up. If they see that what you want is some kind of data, they may give that to you. If what you want is to go to the field, they will show you the way to the field. If what, you know, they will do all the correct things, but you'll get nothing truthful. We call it the revenge of the native. So it happens. So there is a game that goes on. If they see you are not anchored and you don't even have the ambition to be anchored, they know exactly how to play that game. It has happened for so long. Africans are experts in it. So don't for a moment think that just because maybe the word EFA is in your campaign, you've got it. No, 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 not at all, because as I will demonstrate, EFA came with such baggages. It was located in such a toxic global environment that the campaign to get children into schools was like it was loaded with shit, you know, from just about every quarter. African countries were being bludgeoned from different angles. And so to sort of say, we want all children to go into school, people say, really? Really? How about this and that and that and that which is happening simultaneously? What's your position on it? And you say, us, we are interested in education. Hello. Hello. You know? So let me just say, through all of this, education thinking and practice has actually been locked into two major types of constraints. And I will go into this because that understanding will, through that understanding, you will find your umbilical connection to Africa. And if you can't find that connection, do the campaign elsewhere, actually, because what is driving Africans today is something very deep, and it does not exist in the literature that you read regularly. The first relates to the immense vacuum in the broader philosophical framework so necessary to provide the propulsion and ensure cohesiveness in generating truly African alternatives. The second pertains closely to the constrained policy spaces within the African countries, which were exacerbated by the conditionalities of structural adjustment programs on the one hand, and the undergirding sort of structure of dependency of neocolonialism on the other. I now turn to that first part, the philosophical vacuum, to guide the fostering of innovations in Africa. Some of these things may look so trite, but let me just say it so it is on record. Because ever since time immemorial, education has always been established as the means by which society perpetuates itself. Education not only mirrors society, but societal values are reflected in the educational processes and institutions. Within the African context, there has always lingered that need to better understand education by giving critical attention to what type of society or what type of social movement is generating or constituting that education. So where does education get its force, its moral force exactly? Out of which society does it mirror exactly? Whose societal codes in fact informs education? Now, during the first decades of independence, African leaders took up this challenge, giving rise to various philosophies. In Zambia, you heard of humanism. Tanzania, African socialism, along with things like self-reliance, etc., to undergird the development of the continent. That in the past 3 decades, these kinds of conceptions died or faded away was no coincidence. It was no coincidence. Why? Because the rise of philosophies to underpin the understanding of education threatens the 4th pillar of Western policy. After the military, economic, and so on, the 4th one is education and culture. That is the 4th parameter of Western global dominance. The West needs that there should be no philosophy of education anywhere. It is essential to the sustenance of Western dominance. Education is key to the maintenance of Western societies. And if education is propagated minus a philosophy, then the issue is only that of compatibility. And then it is just access, it's just more of it, and they should pass, and they should then do. Gradually what happens is that the world's outlook becomes, what we say, Western wired to be Western compatible. The point at which incompatibility